there's two hemispheres of the brain. The left hemisphere, which is the one that's developed in Western society, which is all about problem solving and navigating the external world. And then there's the right hemisphere, which is in Western society used for vacations and holidays, is how we navigate our internal world, our inner world. And so right now, Western society is a bit atrophied with using or really understanding the immense power. And, you can even say that it's actually even more important than the left hemisphere of the brain. Of the right hemisphere of the brain. So those qualities that we hear about that we kind of, think they're dessert are creativity, imagination, intuition, spiritual connection, emotional intelligence. So I help people see that they have this anatomical design, that it's right there, and that once they organize those capacities to be kind of like a winning team, then they can forgive.
Before we embark on today's conversation, I want to pause for a moment to soak in the immense gratitude I feel for each and every one of you. Week after week, you show up here, lending your hearts, your curiosity, and your presence in this space. What a gift it is to share this journey with you. When I first began these conversations, I had no idea what they would grow into. A tapestry of connection woven together by your stories, your messages, and your reflections. This community is more beautiful than I could have dreamt, and it's all because of you. Every note you've sent, every story you've shared about how these conversations have landed in your life fills me with profound sense of joy and purpose. It reminds me of the magic we create together, the way we're learning, growing, and celebrating the tender, messy, and extraordinary moments that make us human. So as we look ahead to 2025, I am so thrilled to share that there are even more luminous conversations, soul-stirring guests, and transformative stories waiting for us. Together, we'll continue to dive deep, ask meaningful questions, and discover new ways of being. If this space has touched your life, if you've even found a slither of inspiration, I would love for you to join our growing circle by hitting the subscribe button. It's such a simple act, but it allows us to expand this beautiful community and welcome others into the warmth we've created together. And now, my friends, let's take a deep breath and step into today's conversation, a moment of connection and discovery that I hope will leave your heart fuller than when you arrived. Thank you. What if forgiveness wasn't about letting someone else off the hook, but about setting yourself free? Imagine a healing power so profound it could transform even the deepest wounds into peace and unconditional love. In this deeply moving conversation, I sit down with the extraordinary Dara Mckinley, a teacher and guide who redefines forgiveness as a sacred act of self-healing. Together, we explore how to channel unconditional love into the places that hurt, unlock the divine wisdom within us, and reclaim the emotional freedom we all deserve. This is more than a podcast episode. It's an invitation to rewrite the story of your pain into one of liberation and love. Enjoy. Well, here we are again. Hello, everybody. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Doesn't matter what side of the planet you're sitting on at this moment. We have another amazing guest for you. So welcome to the show, Dara Mckinley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
So Dara, the way that we love to start the show, we always love to ask our guests, what inspired you to do what you do today?
Whew, okay. So I just jump right into what brought me to the forgiveness path, because what I do today is I teach a 6-week online course called How to Forgive that offers a very practical step-by-step process to help people achieve the experience of forgiveness. And I define forgiveness as a healing modality and I think it was always meant to be a healing modality. And so I'm kind of like helping people understand it in that frame. So essentially, I was born a very spiritual little girl and went on to study alternative spirituality and psychology. And in my early 20s, I had the idea for a business, and I In my naive enthusiasm, jumped in with business partners who I would ultimately be incompatible with. But the business took off. And so we endured each other for as long as we could, which was a good number of years. And then everything fell apart and I was pushed out of the business. And my initial reaction to that was relief because the relationships were very stressful. And so I was like, oh, finally I can be free of these difficult relationships. And my second feeling was, oh, wow, but it was my idea. It brought me a ton of joy and now it's gone and I feel heartbroken. But at this point in my life, I had 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind me. So I thought, okay, Dara, this is a tough blow, but you have the skills to move forward. You're going to lean into your significant relationships. You're going to recreate your life. You're going to focus on gratitude. You're going to process your emotions and on and on. And I went ahead and did all those things. And 3 years later, I noticed, and I have my Buddhist background probably to thank for this, I noticed that I still had a negative narrative looping in my head, and it would pop up when I'd be doing the dishes or folding the laundry. And as this is happening, I start sliding into a mystery illness that had like the symptoms of fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. And I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I start getting very, very upset that something's wrong with me. And because I have this spiritual genetics that, again, I was just born with this very strong spiritual connection. People who have these strong spiritual connections are really good at the come to Jesus moments, like when you really have to go down on your knees and kind of demand, like, show me the way out of this. Like, I am so upset right now, please give me a sign. How do I step forward? So I had this moment, and the message I got back was to forgive. And I knew I had something I needed to forgive, but like most people, when they bump up against that message during a time of strong emotions, I did not appreciate that message. I did not want it to be the answer to my problems. I kind of rolled my eyes as like a teenager, like, oh, how in the world is this going to help me? And but within an hour, I kind of came around to it because it was so clear and strong. And so I thought, okay, Dara, you like to try new things. This is 2012. You like to try new things. Just give it a shot. See if it works. Get online. Find out who did the 5-step how to forgive, whatever, whatever, and follow it and see what happens. And so I get online and I type in how to forgive. And 99.9% of what came up was why a person should forgive and nothing about how, except on a few forums, there would be someone like me going, but how? How do you do it? And the answer they were getting back was, you just do it. So I closed my computer and I was like, whoa, like I'm on my own here because I can't just do this. Like I really do need instructions. And so I also had the thought like, okay, well, Dara, you have 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind you. If anyone can come up with directions, like you have it in you. So figure this out. And so the question I asked myself, which answering it was the first step I took onto the forgiveness path, was, okay, I've been ruminating about how unjust this thing that happened 3 years ago was. What is the opposite of doing that? And my answer to that question was, oh, I would bless it with the highest love. And with that answer, I took my first step onto the forgiveness path. And over the next 48 hours, it really kind of just poured into me this process that I would follow over the next 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, I let it go. And for the first time in 3 years, I was at complete peace about what happened. And I remember having 2 thoughts that I didn't know at the time were going to change my life. And the first one was, I was a geek for healing modalities prior to having this experience. And I thought, wow, forgiveness is for real. Like forgiveness really works. Like, oh my goodness. And then my second thought was, and that wasn't pardoning. Why does everyone say forgiveness is pardoning? And I kind of just thought, oh, well, I'm so happy I figured that out, onward with my life. But over the coming years, I would talk to people about my experience and talk to them about their understanding and watch mainstream understanding. And I started to see like, oh, wow, like Mainstream understanding is actually obscuring the forgiveness path for a lot of people. And that's when I realized that I had something to offer with what I had experienced that night.
So I'd love to start with the basics. So let's look
Yeah.
at what exactly is forgiveness.
So, mainstream definitions are letting go, pardoning, having compassion, and ceasing anger. And you can also kind of throw in there like having unconditional love for your adversaries. And I define, so I'm offering a new definition. And I want to preface that like there are people who have survived wars and atrocities and really incredibly difficult things that swear that pardoning is what set them free. And I believe these people. And so even though I'm challenging people, I'm asking people to question the pardoning definition. I'm also, if it works for you, I believe you. And I'm actually I'm offering an additional understanding of forgiveness for the people who pardoning doesn't work for. And that's a huge demographic of people. so so with that said, I define forgiveness as one's ability to apply unconditional love, which is a spiritual love, and you and I can talk about that further. To apply unconditional love, that's part one of the definition. And the second part is, and one's ability to identify exactly what needs it. And once those two skills are developed and synchronized and practiced, then forgiveness prevails.
I love that. And the reason why I was asking, I also, it's funny, we've had this conversation a few times on the show with different guests in regards to forgiveness. I was practicing forgiveness, Dara, for years and years and years, and I was still getting the same triggers and the same experiences, and nothing was shifting for me. And I did the Ho'oponopono and all the different methodologies you could possibly think out there. And what I was realizing that every time I was forgiving an experience, the visual component of that experience was coming up. And if anything, it was actually activating the experience even more. And so one day I said to myself, well, what about if I just accept that this all took place? And there was this sense of lightness, whether it was, like you talk about the unconditional love, but the acceptance of what took place, knowing that as a soul, I chose this life and I played a part in it, which was a big piece, again, of accountability. But that is how I was able to let go of all of those past experiences, because I felt like every time I was remembering what I need to forgive or forgiving an ex or whatever that may be, it kept bringing up the pain and the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I completely understand what you're saying, and I love how you were able to evolve into a greater sense of peace about it. And I practice the things that you talked about myself. And what I think kind of like you ran into one of the things that I have observed with mainstream forgiveness narratives is that there's a somatic piece to it. And you can have all the forgiveness perspective in the world and really believe in unconditional love and compassion and all those things. But if you don't address the somatic piece, like the energy that's in the body, meaning like it's important for us to be able to apply, this is again my whole shtick. It's important for us to be able to apply unconditional love to the circumstance. And it's also important to be able to apply it to the parts of ourselves that were affected. And you can't, in my view, you can't do one without the other. Like, and that to me is kind of like the missing piece that's out there, is that there's just so much external focus about what has been done to you and not as much attention to like, oh wow, and that left a mark in my body that also needs to be addressed in order for me to really arrive at a sense of peace, and really quite honestly to see what unconditional love can do and what it's made of. Like if we're congested with emotions that aren't being attended to, unconditional love will only be able to penetrate so far. But if we get that circulating and get that moving and get it tended to, like we attend to all the other anatomical systems of the body, like why don't we attend to those pieces also? Then unconditional love can really saturate us in a very deep way. And it's a free medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were speaking, I was just thinking you can't think your way out of feelings, right? So it's
Right.
yeah, so it's a very there is a so what you were saying just now is basically we need to clear our emotional whirlpool that lives in this vehicle, and before we can get to unconditional love.
No, well, yes. And um, so the first thing that I teach people is how to access and apply unconditional love. Um, and then the second thing I teach people is how to get the emotional realm circulating. And often when you get it circulating, it does clear, but I try not to give people too much of agenda. Like if I can just get it circulating, then to me, that's, I won. And, and that person is much emotionally healthier at this point. Because right now, Western society is so, developing the mind that when we get those emotional swells, people are locking down on it, right? And trapping the emotion. So again, I see emotions as, and it's intense, and I know it's intense, and I don't mean to minimize emotions at all. I'm a highly sensitive person. I experience very, very deep emotions. If anything, like I, being a teacher and stepping forth and saying what I'm going to say, I almost feel like the universe takes me to task, because they want me to really be walking my talk, So I don't want to minimize emotions at all. I'm well aware of how strong they can be, but I also feel like they're so strong because people have so much misunderstanding about what they are and what they need. It's almost like we're just kind of left out, swimming for our lives at sea when strong emotions come, the way Western society is currently addressing them. Even there's such a movement to emotion positivity right now, but there's like the words management and regulate, like even those are a subtle diss to emotions. Even though there's such a step in the right direction, they're still treating emotions as this thing that you got to be, wary of, and you got to take seriously, when there's actually like a real soul magic that they're representing. I mean, but this is a whole like bigger conversation. I knew you and I were going to go deep very quickly.
Yeah, I do. I love
So
going
I hope
deep.
that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think you've got to
Mhm,
feel it to heal it. I honestly
mhm,
feel that, and that's why I'm curious about how do you get into conditional love? Because when you're talking about getting to conditional love first and then
mhm.
worrying about moving the emotions, I'm really love to maybe unpack that. How do you get to unconditional love first?
So when I say I was born a very spiritual girl, I was born with a felt sense of unconditional love. So, and I'm not an unconditionally loving person, but I felt it. And I remember my mother wouldn't, I came from a Catholic background, and my mother didn't raise us. She raised my sister and I to be seekers because she felt oppressed by religion. But I had all these aunts and uncles who were like, "You're making a mistake. You need to put her in Sunday school." And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, like I feel this feeling. And if Sunday school is going to explain what this feeling is, bring it on. But she wouldn't do that. She said, nope, these kids are going to decide for themselves and be their own seekers. And it was a really beautiful teaching that she gave us. But anyway, my point is that night when I answered that question, oh, I would bless it with the highest love. I then had to reach for the highest love. And just for whatever the way I was born and designed, it was right there. So it wasn't a big deal for me to reach for it. I know that that's just kind of me and people who also identify as just being born very spiritual. I know that for a lot of people, they don't have that feeling. However, it is coming through their life. Unconditional love is working through us and working for us in many ways. And so it's about really recognizing it. And for some of us, it's through family, some of it's through our passions, through our work. A lot of people experience it in nature. So it's like really, if you don't have the visceral experience that I and a lot of people have, there's still a way that it's operating within you that you need to just start paying attention to and identifying. One of my favorite things is to, I get interviewed by devoted meditation practitioners a lot, and I love those interviews. Maybe you're one, but I love to ask, have you ever merged with a massive love during your meditation? And more often than not, the answer is yes. Particularly for the people who meditate for hours and hours, they say they have merged with this huge love that's almost overwhelming at first. Like it's almost a little scary when it first comes forward. So that's what I'm representing. Uh, that's that's the medicine that I'm. And even though a meditation practitioner will feel, or someone who's had a near-death experience will feel it in the most acute, visceral way, it is operating through all of us at all times, and it's really a matter of identifying it. And once you identify it, there it is. That's a medicine. That's not just some like cool, groovy spiritual thing that you get to, experience by sitting hours on a meditation mat or having a near-death experience. That's something that's operating in the earth realm that is medicinal.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I have had many of those experiences where I call it true bliss, where you become this, there is no self. It's just
Right,
you become really
right,
one with everything that is, and
right,
this euphoria that you experience. But I think that we all have that. I think
right.
that, like you said, it's all within us. So that's really important for all of us to understand. It's not something we go seeking for. It's already there. It's about what is it
Mm-hmm.
that I need to do to activate it, or
Right,
slowing down. It could be as simple as slowing down. That's why I think a lot of the meditators tap into it, because they're calming their nervous system, calming their brain, that then they're able
right,
to tap into what's already within us.
right.
So what you're saying is then, so that's step one, where you really tap into the unconditional love. And then how do you get with the second part with the emotions? So what about if somebody's been carrying something for 10 years? I know some, gosh, I know some people that have been carrying the anger of their divorce 10, 15 years ago to this
Mm-hmm.
day, to this
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
So even tapping into our sense of unconditional love that resides within us, what do we do with these other swirl of emotions?
So, right. So, I teach people, where is the past right now? Right? The past is in a somatic energy in our body. That's the only place the past is right now in this moment. So even though there's like this incredibly strong narrative of many, many things and potential violations and betrayals and ruptures that have happened, right now, if you wanted to heal it and access it, it really is a matter of just tuning in and developing your body awareness and finding where those ruptures have accrued. And once you find them, and so this is the next piece I teach people. So actually, the emotional piece that I teach people is actually the third thing I teach people. The second thing I teach people is that we are anatomically designed to forgive. And what I mean by that is that there's two hemispheres of the brain. The left hemisphere, which is the one that's developed in Western society, which is all about problem solving and navigating the external world. And then there's the right hemisphere, which is in Western society used for vacations and holidays and weekends, is what how we navigate our internal world, our inner world. And so right now, Western society is a bit atrophied with using or really understanding the immense power. And, you can even say that it's actually even more important than the left hemisphere of the brain. Of the right hemisphere of the brain. So those qualities that we hear about that we kind of, think they're dessert are creativity, imagination, intuition, spiritual connection, emotional intelligence. So I help people see that they have this anatomical design, that it's right there, and that once they organize those capacities to be kind of like a winning team, then they can forgive. So one of the things that the right hemisphere does, it's our somatic awareness, right? And it can let us know where in our body needs our attention and needs to be untangled and or needs to be circulated, or specifically what I particularly love to teach people is what needs to be seen. So I have listened to your podcast, and I know you're very aware of the four realms, right? The realm of behavior, the realm of the practical realm, the realm of matter, the realm of air, the mental realm, and the realm of emotions, the water realm. So each of those realms needs something in order to do what it does. So the realm of action needs freedom. The realm of practicality needs resources. The realm of the mental realm needs information. The emotional realm needs to be seen. And I think that 2-year-olds are the greatest bodhisattvas on the planet because when they're in the midst of an immense tantrum over what to adults seems like complete nonsense, if you try to reason with them, fix it, stop it, contain it, all you do is inflame it. But if you simply turn to that 2-year-old and say, I'm so sorry the stick broke. You completely see them, feel seen, and they will look at you with the eyes of gratitude. And then you say, and what else do you have to say about that? And they'll say, and that was my favorite stick. And we'd be like, and that I see that was your favorite stick. And again, you see the emotional realm move and you see it decompress. And so what is typically seen as the temper tantrums of a 2-year-old is actually one of our greatest teachers right there about how the emotional realm works and what it's seen. And can you just see it? Do you have to like judge it, analyze it, make it wrong or right, have it make sense? Can you just see it in its pure form and let it be, illogical? So what? Just see it.
So you're saying that from an emotional perspective, what we really are tapping into is once the emotion is seen, it's not to judge it, it's not to resist it, it's not to do anything with it, but just to allow it to experience. Yes, I'm angry that this took place, even though you've done the unconditional love. Because I also know that too, that from my experience, that when I've practiced meditation, it's almost like it dissolves anything else that resides with, and I'm talking about even dissolve emotions. I've experiences where I've done, a long meditation over a period of a long time, and I have felt that has naturally dissolved, like old wounds, old emotions, and really come into this clear vessel of understanding what I've come here to do. So do you see that also take place, that when somebody gets to that real point, that significant point of unconditional love, that it does dissolve the emotions, or we still need to work through the emotions, so that the emotions are being seen, heard, and valued for their experience?
I think it's both. I think the emotions need to be seen, heard, and valued, not indulged, not, taken as fact. Like they really just need to be seen, viewed as an anatomical system that needs what I call vitamin C. And again, like a lot of times that releases emotions, but at the very minimum, I just simply want to get the emotional realm circulating. Any anatomical system of the body that isn't moving is going to cause problems, right? So I just want to get it moving. And then you come in also with unconditional love. So I say to people, the research question for my course is, what if you take this really intense thing that happened to you and put it in the path of unconditional love over a consistent period of time? But then I do a 2.0. What if you take this really intense thing that happened to you and all the feelings that you have about what happened and put it into the path of unconditional love over a consistent period of time? What's going to dissolve? What's going to shift? What's going to change? What's going to liberate you? What's going to free you? And I always tell people, like, I want to give you an experience because there's so many words out there, and obviously I have to use words, so I'm not I'm being metaphorical here, but I'm so not interested in adding more words to the land of forgiveness. I feel like the land of forgiveness is just chock full of words, and there's so many people who are still not able to step onto the path. And so I really want to give people like a lasting spiritual, emotional experience, like because I think those are, I mean, yeah, I know that transformation is your middle name. So that when we have an actual somatic experience, that is the greatest teacher in the world.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think that, when you were talking about that too, from the emotions, I mean, we have a thing in our academy called the feeling wheel, because some people cannot articulate their emotions. They feel it in their body. They can, the pain's in my gut or my pain's in my hip, but they can't put a word to it. And, I have this saying, if you can name it, you can tame it. I know that's probably adding more words to your vocabulary, which you don't want to be doing.
I love it. Those are effective words.
Yeah, but it's just another way of bringing that from the unconscious or subconscious part of your mind to that conscious part of your mind, so that you can see it. Because I think that really once you see it, it's hard to unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Right.
So when you're talking about the getting movement within emotions, it's not specifically labeling the emotion, but it's more so allowing yourself to experience it somatically. And then, and is there any physical work that you do with them to release it out of their body?
Yes. So I think that there are three ways. I think there are actually five ways that people get their emotional realm seen. And one of the day-to-day ways that we can maybe even take for granted is through our friendships, right? And especially like if you have like really dear, wise, compassionate friends who, when you come to them, like they'll give you amazing advice, but they will see you. You know, I used to be a practicing psychotherapist, and after my first session, this is the second way through therapy. After my first session, I would always get the feedback of like, "Oh my God, I feel so much better. Like, what did you just do?" And all I did was see them, right? And so that's like how powerful vitamin C is. So those two are kind of the main ways that people go about, you know, getting vitamin C. You know, if you're lucky, if you have great parents, you get it from your parents. If you have an emotionally intelligent household, you get it from your emotionally intelligent household. However, those are all dependent on other people, right? And a lot of times, emotional swells can happen in the middle of the night, right? And there's no one to call. There's, you know, it's you and your emotional realm. So I teach people that through writing, and when I teach people through writing, and I really am saying like, let it be raw, like let it be raw, like a 2-year-old would let it be raw. Through movement, and with movement, I say, let it be weird, and like a 2-year-old would let it be weird. I'm telling you, 2-year-olds are like the teachers of all teachers. They just instinctively move their body however it needs to be moved. And that is such an effective way to move emotional energy. And then the third one is through creativity. Again, the way a 2-year-old would create. There's no judgment. There's no, I need to be an artist. It can really be the garbage and recycling in your kitchen. You know, like it can be, keep it simple, keep it simple. But if, when you know that your emotional realm, like I think like if our emotional realm is giving us like an image, a lot. Like I once worked with somebody who said she felt like a bee trapped in a jar. And so she went and got a jar, and she got a little toy bee, and she threw it into the jar and put a lid on it, and left it out in, you know, in her living room. And every time she passed it, and she felt so seen by this bee in the jar. So those are the three methods I teach people, because I think it's so important. Again, like if you have relationships and if you can afford therapy to be able to get it from those places, like wonderful. But we need to be able to see ourselves.
I love that. I love that. That's such a cool way of externalizing what you are experiencing internally as a way to heal it. I love that. So, do you give it a time when it comes to allowing yourself to feel the emotion? Do you give them a time? Because I know, for example, for me, if I am feeling, and I'm human too, so if I'm feeling anger or any form of emotion, I will allow myself to feel it till its fullest expression. But I would say I will give you 24 hours. And after that, Catherine, snap out of it. Because I always think that sometimes we can drown in our emotions if we don't give it a time limit or you know, you can do it, but for only this period of time. Do you set a time on your emotions or how long you are to
You know,
express?
I mainly teach people to do the seeing practice until they feel like a considerable amount of relief. And so, and then I say, okay, and then once you get to that point, then, you know, saturate the feeling, the circumstance, the narrative in unconditional love to wrap that up. But yes, we always, you know, I do believe I'm in total agreement with what you said, that like you can go on and on and on and on in the world of emotion, or the emotions can go on and on and on if you let them. And so we always get to choose if we're going to you know, get too wrapped up in an indulgent narrative, right? And so, yeah, we always have to make that choice. Someone can graduate my course and then start and feel an immense sense of release and inner peace that they haven't experienced. And then if they choose to sit around and ruminate about what happened, Like, sure, you can kind of like dig yourself back down into that hole if you're going to do that. Most people are just so like, I will never ever start that rumination process again because rumination is so it has such a negative impact on our bodies, right? And so typically once a person's liberated from that process, they're like never going back. But we always have that choice, right? Like if we're going to allow negativity to, create an emotional storm again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Oh, and rumination to me, you get stuck in a loop. I think that's the other thing too. It's one of those things. And yes, you can. I've seen some people carry their emotions for, or they wear their hearts on their sleeves, or they carry the emotions for days, even weeks, or even months. And I always think, God, what does that do to your body? Allowing yourself to carry it, but not to. It's almost like keeping it trapped. It's not
Right.
about releasing. It's more keeping it in a box. And this is, it's in a container. And this is where I'm going to carry it. And it can be quite damaging. And you see, like from their physiology, they're carrying this burden. They're starting, even like you can see how they carry this weight on them.
Well, I think that for a lot of people, like considering how intense, I used to like in my young arrogance, my younger years, I used to think, I used to have this thought, why are some people so afraid of emotions? And now, like I'm in my early 50s, I'm like, oh, now I understand why some people are afraid of emotions. Like I have, especially as I've gotten older and gone into perimenopause, like I really like have seen like the bandwidth, of how intense emotions can get. And I have all these skills, right, to process them and to listen to them and to make sense of them and find what is magic or find what is my inner child or find what I just need to like I need more B12, you know what I mean? Like whatever it is. Um, but I think about people who are hitting this point and don't have those skills, right? And I could see how they rush for substances, whether it be the pharmaceuticals. And I'm, again, pro, like, I have no judgment about however anyone is managing their emotional realm because we're all doing the best we can. And we are living in Western society. We are in an emotional void living in Western society. So, but I could see why substances are so why it's when I see someone who's dependent on substances, I see an unseen emotional realm. And when I see someone stuck in a really strong negative narrative, I see an unseen emotional realm. And when I see someone blaming, and having a punitive anger about in their narrative, I see an unseen emotional realm. And as I said, like right now, that's kind of like the big thing that's being blown open, thank God, is, that the emotional realm is a very valid, important, and again, magical place once we know how to surf it.
I know. And I always say, in my classes that I'm the driver of my bus and my bus is filled with emotions. And sometimes when there's emotion that really pops its head up, whether it's anger, whatever that may be, I let them take the front seat. And in the moment, if I'm experiencing it, I might not be able to address it, but I'll park my bus and say, I'll come to you when I'm available, and actually have that dialogue. Like, what are you here for? What am I here to learn from you? And what's the purpose of your visit? Like really understand, because a lot of times we don't do that because we've been taught to push it away, push it up, push it down, suck it up, princess, you'll be right. And actually not deal with our emotions. And then we wonder why we're always frustrated or always overwhelmed or always stressed.
And what's the prize for when you do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. What are the
Yeah, I mean,
consequences?
like that's like once you get to the other side, I almost think like because emotions are so hard to, my latest like favorite definition of emotions is that it's a passageway or a vestibule. Like it's this that even though they can seem so scary and daunting and useless and unnecessary, that like once we meet it in the beautiful way that you just described, um, then we get just to a deeper experience of our soul, right? And when we're on our deathbeds, if we get to say that we lived in alignment with our soul, that's a very successful life, right? I mean, that's the whole reason. I mean, that's my bias, like I want to live in alignment with my soul when all is said
Yeah.
and done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and I think that yeah, it is. It is. I mean, there's a lot of different teachers out there that also talk about the importance of connecting with the heart and with the emotions, because that is the language of the soul. That's the whispers that we tend to ignore and not really lean into. I know today we've been talking about forgiveness, but are there some things that are unforgivable?
So I don't forget, define forgiveness as pardoning. And I actually think that there are some things that are unexcusable and unpardonable. And I actually am a huge fan of accountability. And I think accountability is what moves humanity forward. I think it's a very healthy thing. But with that said, unconditional love really is unconditional. And that's hard for some human minds to wrap their head around because the human brain is conditional and the human existence is conditional. So it's, I liken it to sunshine. The sun has zero ability to withhold itself from whatever is in its path. And that's the exact same thing as unconditional love. Like it has zero ability to not love whatever is in its path, right? So from that perspective, anything is forgivable.
Okay, because I'm thinking also that just from my experience in working with thousands and thousands of people, when you're talking about unconditional love, I know that some people would find it really hard to even tap into that. And so I'm probably curious more about what are those blocks or those obstacles that you see in your work, in your line of work, that get in the way of people either forgiving or even getting to that place of unconditional love. What stops them?
Well, I think you first need to know how to apply it to yourself. And once you know how to apply it for yourself and you can feel it in your own body, then it's easier to apply to other things. So I always start with teaching people how to douse or, soak. I use, these are the words I use a lot, soak themselves in unconditional love first. And I think that because I honestly think that pardoning, the pardoning definition blocks a lot of people from the forgiveness path, as beautiful as that definition is in theory. And again, so many people swear by that definition in a very real way. And I believe these people. But if you look at all the people who balk and are repelled by forgiveness, it's because it means pardoning. And I remember for me, the fact that it had the word give in it, and I had already lost this business. So the fact that the word give was in it just immediately was like I'm going to give another thing to this situation. I know I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people right now, or, women who have suffered infidelity or, or people who have lost, like me, relationship is a crucible, right? Like we will be lucky if we have a lot of successful relationships, but almost all of us are going to have really difficult endings that we need to know how to recover and regenerate from. It's a rite of passage. It's rite of passage. It's a fundamental human experience. And so, the Buddha said life is suffering. And when you first hear that teaching, you're like, oh, thank God someone's finally saying what what my experience. So many people feel so relieved when they first hear that teaching. But I actually think it's a little too much of a blanket statement. I feel like life is going to break our hearts. And we are also designed to regenerate. And so it's like, yes, life is suffering, but we're also regenerative beings. And I feel like that's a narrative or an understanding that a lot of people can get behind, as opposed to just let it go, just pardon, just stop being angry, like to tell somebody who's having like a really strong somatic experience just to stop being angry, it just makes them feel like a failure. Like now I'm failing at forgiveness also. Just have compassion. I'm actually an extremely compassionate person. I can feel what other people are feeling when, as soon as they walk in the room. And yet I still can get somatically blocked by really strong emotions. And so I feel like a lot of these narratives set people up to feel like spiritual failures, like, oh, and now I can't even forgive, like I don't even have, so I think like that's why I hope that what I'm saying kind of gets out there into the world. It's like, no, it's not your ability to unconditionally love, it's your ability to enlist unconditional love. It's almost, I don't know if they have AA in Australia? I imagine they do,
Yes, we
right? Like
do.
Albert, yeah. So it's like, oh, I can't do this, but I can access something that can. One of my I'm not Christian, but the most famous story about Jesus and forgiveness is as he's being crucified, he looks up and says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And people cite the story because here he is in his last moments walking his talk. And that is like one of the most beautiful things about that story. But what I think is also so interesting about the story is that he actually delegated. He said, he looked up and said, "Hey, can you please forgive these guys? Because, I'm dying right now. I'm in a severe amount of pain. And so, but I know you can do it, so can you please do it?" So that's like, I feel like once people have that understanding of it, more people will, eagerly come to the path. Because when you're having such strong emotions, it's really hard to be unconditionally loving when you're filled with, a ton of anger, for example.
I'm right there with you because it took me years. I know for me, it took me years to get to the point of forgiveness, and then I was still carrying all the anger from the forgiveness. But I remember at one stage too that instead it was when I accepted, it actually opened up the possibilities that were available to me. It's for me to see it in a different light. So instead of saying he broke my heart, it was my heart cracked open. And
Hmm.
it was a completely,
Right,
and I saw that my heart cracked open to the possibility of more love and more
right.
expansive rather than he broke my heart. And so it was really fascinating, just the shift in words and the shift of meaning that I gave it, because obviously it's always the meaning we give it, to how it shift exactly what I was experiencing in my body. So I totally agree with you. Like the whole forgiveness, it took me years, like forgive. I haven't done anything wrong. Why should I forgive? So what you were
I
talking
love
about,
that.
yeah, sorry.
I love that.
Yeah.
What you just said. Yeah.
When you were talking about the whole delegation piece, so for those people that feel blocked, because I'm thinking about, no, I'm always conscious about some people might go, oh, it's easier said than done. I've tried to do this and I can't. So you're saying that we can delegate forgiveness.
I'm saying forgiveness is a delegation.
So it doesn't have to come from within. We can actually, when you're saying it's a delegation, so when you were giving the whole Jesus story, which I absolutely love, you're saying, so even if you're in pain, you're feeling blocked and you can't get to that unconditional love, you can say, can you please forgive this individual? You're delegating it as a way to support and help you get through it.
Right. I think it's, a lot of, we are unconditional love at our essence, right? And that is a spiritual truth, but I don't necessarily think it's the most practical spiritual truth. And when you're in the throes of really needing to do some practical steps towards healing and recovery, seeing unconditional love as something that's outside of you that you can access and use, just like any medicine, is way more user friendly than all of a sudden trying to, turn yourself into unconditional love when you're, carrying the most heavy burden. So yes, I teach people that forgiveness is a delegation. It's your ability to access unconditional love. And I have like 100 other things I could say about it, but
Oh no,
does
and
that
I
answer your
I
question?
do love that because it resonates with me very much so because I think it's like instead of trying to it coming up from within because it's what I was saying we all have access to it. It's how do we go about it, and I love the fact that if you can't find yourself or struggle with finding it within you, that you know it exists, that you can actually access it from elsewhere, that it doesn't always have to come from within because we are, like you said, we
Right.
are one. We are all part of that one ecosystem. And so if we can't find it within, we can actually Call it in.
Right. Just like Jesus did in his final moments. That, he couldn't, the burden he was having in that moment was too much. So but he knew where to access it, and where to call it forth from. And once you see it that way, it's such a relief, because again, so many people criticize themselves for not being spiritual enough, or not being unconditionally loving enough. And then it's like, oh wow, it's not my ability to do this, it's my ability to enlist it. It's like, oh, it's so empowering. It's like, oh well, yeah, now I can do this. Like, now I can forgive, like, oh great, this is now all of a sudden become user friendly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also there would be a resistance because there's a level of accountability as well, right? So, and I wonder whether, accountable as in that I too play part in this. And so it is up to me to forgive, or accept that it took place. That's why I was going back to, for me, it was very much that, as a soul, I chose this experience. And what are the gifts in it? What were the lessons for me, rather than looking at probably the opposite sides of the things that took place. And I think that there's a sense of some people really resist, and I see this in our academy, that the accountability that I choose to react this way, I choose to stay stuck, or I choose to hang on to these limiting beliefs, that in itself creates a lot of resistance that I see.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes that accountability piece is the showstopper, is the blocker for a lot of people to release, let go, and accept. Do you see that?
I kind of, I'm all about personal self-responsibility. I think it's like, it is so liberating and amazing. And I also think it's a very next level thing for a lot of people. So I don't necessarily, I believe in it personally, and people who like repeat my course, people do repeat my course just essentially because they appreciate the structure, and they appreciate, I do a lot of energy meditations, again, because as you see, I'm kind of obsessed with moving the energy. So people like that. So when they repeat the course, I'll go down that path deeper with them. But in terms of like just getting somebody to move forward from something that happens, I kind of really just keep it that this is your soul's curriculum for some reason. And do you want to traverse this curriculum with the highest love and, with the highest outcome? Or, do you want to stay looped in a negative narrative that is likely creating problems in your relationships, and problems in your body, and problems with you achieving the things that you want in your life, So that's my frame. But I just want you to know that I love your frame also, and I benefit from your frame. And I definitely have like a therapist who gives me that frame like every chance he gets, So, and I'm all about therapy. I'm all about healing. I'm really a geek for healing modalities. And that's what I think forgiveness is. It's a spiritual healing modality. And I think, we all need different healing modalities at certain points of our lives, depending on what the circumstance is. And forgiveness is a really great foundational one, because the soul's curriculum has a lot of lows. It just does, and so it's like knowing how to confidently climb out of those lows, and process those lows, and transcend those lows, and give those lows to the highest love, is a very practical skill to have.
What has been some of the biggest transformations that you've experienced? Because I'm imagining, like, from a forgiveness, just from my own experience as well, it obviously has an impact on your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, your spiritual body, for the self. What have you been like? What some of the things that you've witnessed? Some of the biggest shifts?
Well, I think it's really good with chronic mystery pains. I've seen people forgive, parents with severe mental illness, people who have felt abandoned by their partners, who have been, I get a lot of people who have been betrayed by their partners. So I have identified 3 timeframes that forgiveness can address. And the first one is episodic, and that's an incident. So to me, like what happened when I lost my business, that was an episodic thing, and I wasn't dealing with it anymore. It was completely in the past. The second one is enduring, and enduring is something like a chronic illness, or having to co-parent with a difficult ex or relationship you can't leave, anything that you wake up every morning and you have to face. That's the enduring time frame. And the third one is epic. And epic is something huge that's gone on for a long period of time. And that's the time frame that a lot of people get really excited about forgiveness because they know they're carrying, there's no doubt that they're carrying around something huge. And within that time frame are childhoods and intergenerational trauma, like just really, really big things that have gone on for long. Those people get excited about forgiveness at first because they know they have something they need to forgive. And then they often go, oh, but too much has happened. Or where would I even begin? And so once you tap into, I call the right hemisphere of the brain the divine mind, that really, like that part of the brain really knows what we need to forgive and in what order. And so once you start just tapping into that part of the brain and kind of calling forth its wisdom and saying, hey, I'm here. I want to do the healing work, show me what step one is, you will start to get messages and information about what your step one is, and so with the episodic time frame, that's actually the most straightforward thing. That's the first one. That's the most straightforward thing to forgive. However, it can also be the most intense thing because like with me, a strong thing has happened within a short period of time, and it really can create a lot of acute emotions. So that's the thing to know about that one. The enduring time frame, sure, I'm not, I'm not going to say forgiveness doesn't create miracles, but you will likely, like with the enduring time frame, you just need to know that forgiveness is going to reduce your emotional stress and is going to help you walk the highest path and increase your intuition about navigating the problem. And with the epic, people are usually blown away by how much forgiveness works, but you need to know that like in the future, you might have deeper layers of what had happened come forth that you'll just need to step up to the plate and forgive. So I can forgive my father's entire legacy, intergenerational legacy, which I've done. But then there was this like one behavior in my childhood that created a lot of acute distress for me that I needed to go in a second time and address that specifically, So there's layers with the epic time frame. So I don't know if that's
Yeah,
helpful to
absolutely
your.
makes sense. Because once you peel off one layer, that it allows the other one to surface. I'm sure there would be
Right,
many layers
right,
depending on
right,
how long.
right. Right. And our right hemisphere of the brain helps us navigate this. So it's not this overwhelming tsunami of issues and incidents. And, the right hemisphere will say, hey, honey, start here. Okay, start with this.
Yeah, because I believe that, I always say that our unconscious mind, because I have people say, Catherine, I've been working through this for years and I thought I was over it. And so no, it's a great thing because it's actually your unconscious mind is only allowing you to deal with what you're capable of dealing with at the time. So when you've got
Right.
more stuff coming up, it means you're ready to for your level two kind of thing, or your next phase of releasing and letting go. So
Right,
I
right.
think that's what happens naturally.
And even though it can seem like, oh, what a nuisance, I need to go back into that. It's like it's all spirit, it's all kindling for our spiritual fire, which is a point that you made, about 10 minutes ago about how what seems like this, horrible burden that we have to transcend somehow is what fortifies us into becoming spiritual powerhouses, into becoming soul aligned and into have this, I think one of the greatest things a person can do is have a rock solid relationship with unconditional love and have a really confident access to using it and applying it. And so forgiveness is actually the path that creates that relationship. The rupture is what brings us to this divine place.
I'm thinking that the majority of us would need forgiveness at some level. Doesn't matter what level. Do you
Mm-hmm.
ever have people come to see you not knowing that they need to forgive anything, but it's just a chronic pain? I've been having this pain in my knee for the last 20 years. And then they do your course and they go, oh, that now just doing all the somatic work, it's brought up a memory that something happened to me when I was 12. Do you have those kind of experiences? Because I think we all need to
Yeah.
experience forgiveness.
Yeah,
Because it
definitely.
doesn't matter. So you do.
Yeah. Yeah. You can take the pain at face value. You can see an aspect to your younger life, or you can see something completely bizarre that makes no sense to you that I usually typically think is probably a past life thing, and but it's really just about whatever the message or the imagery that comes to you around that chronic pain is to, interview it, like how you were talking about with your boss, right? It's like, okay, let's have a conversation. What do you need? What can I give you? And you might not get anything from that, from that conversation. It really just might be this energy that wants to be seen and present by you. So, and then regardless, it's like, okay, how do I merge this energy with the love?
Yeah, I love that. I love it because we're big on integration. And I think that's the only way to really heal anything is to be able to integrate it. I'm also very conscious of your time. So, Dara, is there any questions that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about or bring up in regards to forgiveness before we go to our 3 shiny gold nuggets?
This was a very rich conversation. I think you did an amazing job asking questions. And thank you. I'm
Oh,
good.
amazing. Thank you. So let's go to our 3 shiny golden nuggets. What would be those 3 shiny golden nuggets that you would like to leave for our audience today?
Well, the first is, I would want everybody to know you are anatomically designed to regenerate, heal, and forgive. Like you were born with the ability to do this, and it's really just a matter of tapping into it and start beginning to work those muscles. And then to identify pay attention to how any negative narrative is impacting your body and where in your body. I think the question, what is happening in my body right now, is something, if you ask yourself that question all day long, like that is just such a beautiful kind of like turning reality on its head, right? It's like, oh, there's all these stresses that are happening, but like my power is seeing like, how is it affecting me and where is it affecting me and how can I work with that? And the third one is to really start to notice, how is unconditional love appearing in your life? When do you feel it? Like, when do you feel this unconditional state? Is it for cooking, creativity, when you're out in nature, when you see the smile of a baby, or when you walk into a holy place? Where do you feel that that little gasp of like, oh wow, like this moment is divine? And there it is, right there. And then pay attention to how that's affecting your body. How is that body making you feel? And then that's the medicine.
I love it. And I even love the fact that you call that's the medicine, because it is absolute medicine. We will have all the links in the show notes, but where do you hang out the most?
I hang out the most in podcast conversations.
Okay.
I'm a little bit, I don't teach on social media, but you can find me there. And I do try to keep it inspirational. And my website is what I typed in that night in that fateful night, October 2012, I typed in how to forgive, and that's my website, howtoforgive.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dara, for your time, your energy, and sharing your wealth of wisdom with us. I loved really unpacking the topic forgiveness. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Catherine. This was an amazing conversation. I loved it.